Now, I just want to show you how often CNN lies and how even if you prove it to them and you bring it to their attention, they won't do anything about it. Right around the time in June that Julian Assange signed his plea agreement, where he was forced to plead guilty to a felony of doing journalism and in exchange finally let out of prison and went back to Australia, Kaitlan Collins, who hosts a CNN program, decided of all people that the person who should come on to talk about WikiLeaks and Julian Assange was the disgraced Andrew McCabe, the former deputy director of the FBI. So of course, when wanting to have the public understand what happened with WikiLeaks, she decides to get the former deputy director of the FBI, a senior member of the security state who ended up disgraced and being forced to resign because he lied to investigators about the role that he played in concocting the Russiagate frauds. So he wasn't just the deputy director, but a completely disgraced one, forced to resign for lying. Imagine how amoral you have to be to get fired from the FBI for lying and covering up. So Kaitlan Collins had him on, and he spoke uninterrupted, uncorrected, and told several obvious lies about WikiLeaks when describing what WikiLeaks was and why Assange was in prison.
It's notable to hear you say that. Obviously, his team argued that he should be protected by the same laws that journalists are, that he was releasing sensitive information, but in the public's interest. And so, he's been alternatively celebrated and by some and reviled by others. And so it is striking for me to hear you, given your former, position as the deputy FBI director, to say you think this is the right call.
I do think it's the right call, and don't get me wrong. I think Julian Assange did the wrong thing. Julian Assange hurt the United States government. He put the lives of our troops in danger. He put the lives, particularly of Iraqi citizens who had helped our effort in the war in Iraq, in danger. So this guy did a lot of bad things. But what he did, some of what he did, was very similar to the way that journalists conduct their business. Of course, in other ways, very different, right? There wasn't any of those conversations prior to publication that journalists typically have when they're going to reveal classified and sensitive information, to find out what, reach out to the government entity involved to let them seek comment.
Look at that stupid grin she has on her face. What kind of journalist would allow and invite on by himself to talk about the WikiLeaks prosecution, which led to Julian Assange in prison because he exposed the lies and secrets of the U.S. security state, of which Andrew McCabe was a central part, somebody who has proven already that he's willing to lie, and just let him spew lie after lie, which I'm about to detail, while she just sits there grinning. And everything he's saying, of course, he's a trained liar. He hates WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. He was happy that they forced Julian Assange to plead guilty and finally let him out after he was physically and psychologically destroyed. He said he supported Joe Biden's decision because he didn't want to criticize Joe Biden. But so much of what he's saying here is completely false, provably false. And look at that face she has on her while he does it.
Involved to let them seek comment and then have a conversation, give the government an opportunity to say, hey, typically have when they're going to reveal.
I got to just have you hear this, what he's saying here about why Julian Assange isn't like other journalists.
Conduct their business. Of course, in other ways, very different, right? There wasn't any of those conversations prior to publication that journalists typically have when they're going to reveal classified and sensitive information, to find out what, reach out to the government entity involved to let them seek comment and then have a conversation, give the government an opportunity to say, hey, please don't do this because these people might die as a result. So very big differences there.
Okay, so he made two claims there. One is the claim they always make about any reporting that they hate, which is, he put the lives of troops and informants in harm's way and has blood on his hands. This is completely false. In fact, the government admits, if you ask them, is there any harm you can point to from WikiLeaks' disclosures? They will say, no, nobody was harmed. But the bigger point and the more provable lie here is that what distinguishes WikiLeaks from other journalists, he said, is that WikiLeaks does not try to call the government and ask the government before publishing to give its input on what types of information should be withheld to protect innocent people. WikiLeaks, especially in this 2010 prosecution that caused Assange's prosecution and imprisonment, did exactly that. They repeatedly contacted Hillary Clinton's State Department before publishing and said, we'd like you to give us your input on what information should be redacted so we're not harming any innocent people. So everything she allowed Andrew McCabe there to say with no comment, no fact-checking, no pushback, was an absolute lie, an improvable lie, especially that last part. And so I wrote her this note. She follows me on Twitter, and therefore I could send her a DM, and I did, and it was that same day. And this is what I wrote to her. Quote, "Hi, Kaitlan. In the interview you aired yesterday with Andrew McCabe about WikiLeaks, he said that what differentiates Assange from real journalists is that Assange never contacted the U.S. government prior to publishing classified information in order to give them the opportunity to identify possible dangers from publication. This is completely and provably false. Before the 2010 publications that are at the heart of Assange's indictment, both the media partners with whom Assange worked as well as WikiLeaks itself repeatedly contacted the U.S. government to ask for its input on which documents might endanger people's lives. Here's a foreign policy article from 2010, and there are many more, detailing all the efforts Assange and WikiLeaks' media partners made in doing this and how the Clinton State Department explicitly refused to engage in WikiLeaks to provide this guidance. Though they did provide that guidance with WikiLeaks' media partners like the New York Times and the Guardian, and WikiLeaks itself redacted significant amounts of information in order to avoid harming innocent people." And then I attached just that article that I referenced from Foreign Policy, the title of which was "State Department Refuses to Negotiate with WikiLeaks." And I know she's seen this. I know she's seen tweets about it. So you say, like, hey, maybe you don't know this case at all, which is probably a good reason not to participate in the discussion of it, or at least learn about it before you do, so you can push back if you're going to have a former senior member of the U.S. security state on to talk about it. But probably you didn't know, but now you do. Here's the evidence that you allowed him to lie in an unfettered way. You should correct that. You should go on the air and say, hey, by the way, we had Andrew McCabe on and he said things that evidently were false. But of course, she has no interest in doing that because their function is to lie for the right reasons. And this is what CNN did this morning with Kara Swisher. It's what they did in that other incident. It's what they do all the time. Lying is not an incidental mistake or something that's tolerated. It is something that is required, this kind of lying required to create narratives constantly for politicized reasons. It's the reason why so many people, including myself, have utter contempt for the U.S. corporate media and why that contempt is so well-deserved. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.